heat and thermodynamics today. So today we will start the section called kinetic theory of gases. So as the name suggests, the term kinetic has to do with motion. So this is the theory that explains the behavior of gases on the basis of the motion of the molecules. So it is an explanation for the behavior of gases from basic physical properties like Charles' law, Boyle's law, etc., to more complex situations like understanding the thermodynamics of a gas, the relationship between internal energy and heat and mechanical work, etc., on the basis of the motion of the molecules. So all explanation is on the basis of motion. Hence the term kinetic theory of gases. So we start with the explanation of certain very fundamental aspects of the behavior or the physical properties of a gas for this particular type of theory, which is called the kinetic model of an ideal gas. So kinetic model of an ideal gas is basically the model for a gas which explains the behavior of an ideal gas on the basis of the motion of its molecules, hence the term kinetic model. So any physical model is based on certain assumptions, and accordingly the kinetic model of ideal gas is also based on a set of assumptions. So the assumptions of this model are the following. First assumption is that the an ideal gas is a type of, I mean, ideal gas is a form of matter which in which the molecules are very loosely packed. Okay? Which we all know that in a gas molecules are very loosely packed, hence it does not have a fixed volume and nor a fixed shape. Okay? But the assumption of the kinetic model is such that the the distribution of mass in a gas is so loose that most of the gas's volume is actually empty space. The actual volume occupied by the gas molecules is negligible compared to the volume of the gas itself, because most of the volume of the gas is just empty space. That is the intermolecular space. So the first assumption is about that, okay, that the volume occupied by molecules in an ideal gas is negligible compared to the volume of the gas itself. Which basically implies that the gas's volume is predominantly empty space between molecules. So this naturally leads to the second assumption that if the molecules are so loosely packed in an ideal gas that the actual volume of the molecules is negligible compared to the intermolecular space, the volume of the intermolecular space, that means there is hardly any interaction in the form of intermolecular bonds, okay, or intermolecular attractive forces in the case of an ideal gas. So the kinetic model assumes that actually there is no intermolecular attractive force in the case of gas molecules. The gas molecules are completely free of each other because of the very loose packing of the molecules, okay, because of the first assumption. And hence, they do not interact with each other other than when they collide with each other. So, second assumption is that gas molecules do not experience any intermolecular bonds or attractive forces. The second assumption actually naturally follows from the first one and are completely free. Okay. Then the next assumption is that all collisions between molecules or between a molecule and the inner surface of the gaseous container are perfectly elastic. Perfectly elastic means there is zero loss of kinetic energy during the collision. And the final assumption of the kinetic model is that the gas molecules move in perfectly random motion or something given a specific term called Brownian motion. So we will learn more about this term Brownian motion next. Let's note down the assumption first. Yeah. So attraction forces. This is the intermolecular bonds or attraction forces. Okay, are absent basically. So they are. So the molecules are completely free. Is that clear, Ritika? Okay, so let's understand the point about Brownian motion in more detail. So the meaning of this statement, Brownian motion or perfectly random motion, is that if we consider gas in a certain container or inside a certain three-dimensional space, where we are taking this as the XYZ axis, then at any point of time, the molecules of gas, they are moving about such that their velocities are equally distributed in all directions. So this is just a rough representation. Obviously, there will be many, many molecules, even in a small space, because the number of molecules will be of the order of magnitude of Avogadro's number. But just to represent that the molecules are very loosely packed. So what should happen here, that the gas molecules, as you can see from the first assumption, the way I'm drawing them, the molecules occupy a very small space compared to the actual volume of the gas, because most of the volume is empty space. And secondly, Brownian motion means that these velocity vectors that I'm drawing, they are distributed randomly in all directions. Okay, so perfectly random motion means, the meaning of this term, Brownian motion or perfectly random motion, is that the motion is equal in distribution in all directions. Or another way of saying it is that the probability of motion is equal for all directions. Okay, so the motion of gas molecules has equal probabilistic distribution in all directions at any instant of time. So one way of interpreting what is the meaning of equal probabilistic distribution in all directions is that if I, at a particular instant, if I count the number of molecules which are moving in a particular direction, like positive X direction, at that particular instant, then that number of molecules that are moving along the positive X direction are equal to the number of molecules moving along the negative X or positive Y, negative Y, etc., or any other direction. That means over the entire set of molecules, the distribution of the molecules in terms of direction of velocity is equal for all the directions. Not no one direction is favored over the other. So that is one way of interpreting equal probabilistic distribution. Another way of interpreting probabilistic distribution being equal in all directions is that if I randomly pick out one molecule at a given instant of time, then the probability that its direction of motion is a is in along one axis is equal to the probability that its direction of motion is along any other axis. So no one axis of motion is favored over the other axis of motion. Okay, so that is the meaning of this equal probabilistic distribution in all directions. So that means it is random motion. It is perfectly random motion. Okay. All directions of motion are equally likely for a given molecule, or there's equal probability for a molecule to move in any direction compared to any other direction. So now this perfectly random motion or equal probabilistic distribution of motion along any direction compared to any other direction has certain important implications. And one of those implications is that the if we average the velocity for all the molecules, this quantity over here, this is the average velocity or mean velocity, okay, where capital N would be the number of molecules. So if we do this average quantity, it will come out to be zero. Now, why the average velocity will come out to be zero is because the direction of motion being perfectly random in distribution implies that the vector sum, that is summation v over all the molecules, will be zero. Okay, because vector sum obviously means we are taking direction into account. So the number of molecules moving along a particular axis in the positive direction will balance out the number of molecules moving along the negative axis for that same direction. So the vector sum of the velocities over all directions over all the molecules will always come out to be zero, because the molecules velocities are randomly distributed over all the directions in the three-dimensional space. So that is one important implication of the concept of equal probabilistic distribution in all directions, that if we do the vector sum of the velocities of all the molecules at any instant of time, it has to come out to be zero, because the directions are equally distributed for all the different molecules. So always in a Brownian motion, the mean velocity or the average velocity will be zero. So next is we'll understand that mathematically, whenever we are dealing with a quantity whose average value is zero, like the velocity over here, the average velocity is zero because velocity is a vector quantity. Then instead of defining average velocity as a significant physical quantity, we define something called root mean square, RMS velocity, which is nothing but root mean square velocity. So VRMS. As the name suggests, this is square root of mean of the square. So it is square root of summation VI square divided by N, because V square is average. This is mean square or average of square of V. So this quantity is nothing but summation V square for all the molecules divided by the number of molecules. So root mean square just becomes square root of that. So now when it comes to RMS velocity, we will see something important. If the velocity for a given molecule is Vx I cap plus Vy j cap plus Vz k cap, this is the velocity for a given molecule. It has three xyz components because they're moving in three-dimensional space. So the square of the magnitude of the velocity is Vx square plus Vy square plus Vz square. So accordingly, V square's mean is Vx square plus Vy square plus Vz squares mean. So this bar on top of a quantity means mean. So this is mean or average value of x, any value. Okay, so x mean means summation x divided by the number of terms. Okay, so like that over here, mean square means average value of v square. So that is Vx square plus Vy square plus Vz square is average. So that is Vx square is mean plus Vy square is mean plus Vz square is mean. Now the very important quantity over here is that because in Brownian motion, the probability of motion is equal over all directions. That is equal probabilistic distribution over direction. Now this will not be zero, na beta, because it's not taking direction into account. Na? It's Vx squares average, Vy squares average. So zero कैसे होगा? Summation of a square quantity cannot be zero, na? It's not positive negative. It's Vx square. That is why we define RMS, na? Okay. Now the next. Now because of this, that the probability of motion is equal over all directions. Okay. So because of that, Vx squares average will be the same as Vy squares average. Will be the same as Vz squares average. So V squares average, we can say, is equal to 3 times Vx squares average or 3 times Vy squares average or 3 times Vz squares average. So therefore, V RMS, which is square root of V square, is equal to square root of so this is an important property of Brownian motion. Arey Sarvesh, I just explained this. We are averaging the square of Vx, na? And the square of Vy and the square of Vz. So how can it be zero? Square of Vx is not a plus minus quantity, na? Okay, so note this down. I'll explain with an example why RMS cannot be a zero quantity. Average of a particular parameter can be zero if that parameter can be plus minus, but root mean square cannot be zero because you're squaring the quantity. Okay, so let's understand this difference between mean of a quantity and RMS of a quantity. So let's understand this with an example. Mean value versus RMS value. It is root mean square value for any quantity. So for example, suppose I have x1 equal to plus 1, x2 equal to 0, x3 equal to minus 0.5, x4 equal to plus 0.2, x5 equal to, let's say, minus 0.7. I ask you find x bar, that is mean value or average value of x above. So what we'll do? We'll do summation x from 1 to 5 over here and divide that by 5. So do the summation 1 plus 0 minus 0.5 plus 0.2 minus 0.7 divided by 5. So it just so happens that this comes out to be 0. Okay, you can see we have 0.5 plus 0.2. So it comes out to be 0. But in the same quantity, now if I ask you find RMS value of x. So x is RMS value is nothing but square root of mean of square. So that will become nothing but square root of summation xi square divided by n. It will be square root of x1 square plus x2 square. You can see that no matter what the value of mean, this cannot be 0 because your mean square is a quantity that cannot become 0 now because you're squaring the terms. Okay, so this will be approximately that is my RMS value. So anyway, this example is just a random example to explain to you the difference between RMS of a quantity versus mean value of a quantity. Okay, so finish writing this down and try another example. Now, three particles have velocities find the mean velocity and RMS velocity. Just finish writing this down and try out this question next. Okay, very good. So let's confirm the answer. The average velocity will be 0, whereas the RMS velocity will be 20. So let's understand how that's happening here. So in this question, you should be getting these two answers. So when you do this calculation, you can see you'll get 20 minus 10 I cap plus 0 plus 10 root 3 minus 10 root 3. So that will be a null vector. Okay. So the average velocity will come out to be 0. But as far as the RMS velocity is concerned, so it is square root of the sum of the squares divided by 3. Now you can see that V1 being 20 I cap, 400, okay. V2 being minus 10 I cap plus 10 root 3 J cap. V2 square is and similarly V3 this becomes this much. Sarvesh, this is not a question you should be asking me after you have completed vector algebra earlier. Then go back to the notes of vectors and see how vectors are added. We spent a lot of lectures on vector algebra to understand these kind of operations only. Yeah, it's fine. What I have done is all right. Everybody else has also understood. You can go back to your notes and study about component algebra of vectors again if you like, because you have forgotten. It's very disappointing if you're asking me how these vectors have been added over here. Okay, now let's move on to the application of these assumptions of of kinetic theory of gases. So back to kinetic theory of gases, the relation between RMS velocity of gas molecules and the state of the gas, that is pressure, volume, temperature. Let's understand this. So let's say we have a container which has gas molecules, or rather which is occupied by a gas. So this is a closed container which is cubical. Okay, so it has dimensions of L by L by L. So the volume V is equal to L cube. Okay. Now this container, it contains an ideal gas at pressure P and temperature T. By this we mean absolute temperature expressed in kelvins. And the ideal gas that we're talking about has molar mass, capital M, and number of moles, small n. So from this we can also see that it has molecular mass, which will denote with the symbol small m, which is molar mass divided by Avogadro's number. And it has number of molecules, which we will denote with the symbol capital N, which is number of moles multiplied by Avogadro's number. So first of all, make sure you understand the difference between capital M and small m as the two symbols here. Capital M is molar mass, whereas small m is the mass of a molecule. So for example, oxygen gas has molar mass of 32 grams. So the mass of each oxygen molecule is 32 divided by 6.022 into 10 raised by 23 in grams. Similarly, if we have 5 moles of oxygen gas, that means how many molecules we will have? 5 into 6.022 into 10 raised by 23, or 5 times Avogadro's number. So that's how we calculate the molecular mass from molar mass. What is ordinarily known as molecular weight in chemistry, but it's actually mass because it's expressed in grams. So the gas sample in our container, it consists of n moles, small n number of moles of a particular ideal gas of molar mass capital M. That gas exists at pressure P, temperature T, and volume V of L cube, because the dimensions of the container are L by L by L. Okay, so next up we'll see, by applying the assumptions of the kinetic model of the ideal gas, which we have understood earlier, we'll be able to find a relationship between the RMS velocity of gas molecules, this quantity Vrms, and the state of the gas, that is its pressure and its volume or its temperature, etc. Okay. So let's see how that happens. So the pressure P is nothing but force per unit area on the inner surface of the container's walls. Okay. So that force per unit area that acts, it acts due to collisions made by the gas molecules with the surface. So those collisions involve collision impulse forces, and hence there is a force per unit area or pressure that the gas is applying on the inner walls of the container. Of course, these collisions are perfectly elastic collisions. So now let's understand like this, that suppose for the container, we're looking at this particular wall. So this is the side view of this wall. So this was a three-dimensional picture. Now I'm making this a two-dimensional picture. Okay. Now, if any particular molecule inside over here comes and makes an impact with this wall, okay. So molecule with this velocity impacts the wall, then just after impact, the velocity will become, let's say, v prime minus vx I cap plus vy j cap plus vz k cap, because the impact is one with coefficient of restitution equal to 1. So you can see that the approach velocity or the component of velocity which is normal to the wall, this is the velocity, and the component of velocity along this direction is Vx. So the gas molecule will collide in such a way that after impact, going with a velocity V prime like this, where this component of velocity just gets reversed in direction. There's no loss of kinetic energy. So it just gets reversed in direction, but the magnitude remains the same. So that is what happens in a perfectly elastic collision. So when it's over here, this is applying a impulse on the wall. Just after impact, this changes to this. So impulse due to the impact with the wall, that is equal to change in momentum. Okay. So the initial momentum before impact was mv. The final momentum just after impact is mv prime. So you can see that the change in momentum is minus 2m vx I cap. Okay. So the collision impulse, so for a molecule moving with velocity v like this, colliding with the wall, the collision impulse will result in this. So this is the collision impulse for a molecule of mass small m moving at P equal to this value. Colliding with the wall. In this case, the wall is parallel to the YZ plane. You can see the x-axis is the normal to the wall. So the wall is parallel to the YZ plane. Just make a note up to here, then we will take this further from here. So once we have calculated the impulse due to a single collision, we will calculate the rate of impulse. That is the rate of transfer of momentum with respect to time. And the rate of impulse with respect to time will become nothing but the force. And further, the force divided by the area of the wall will give us the pressure. So that's how we'll find the relationship between the RMS velocity and the pressure of the gas. That's the change in momentum. No, beta. Delta P here. Delta P is the final momentum after the impact minus the initial momentum. So this is the change in momentum. Okay. So this theorem that we are using over here, it's actually a vector. Later you can take magnitude on both the sides. So this is called the impulse momentum theorem, no? Which you must have studied in the collisions chapter. Okay. Impulse equals to the change in momentum. This is called the impulse momentum relation. Where impulse is basically what? It is force multiplied by the time over which the force is acting. So this symbol is delta. It means change in. So for example, delta x means the final value of x minus the initial value of x. Okay, so once we have understood this impulse due to a single collision, now we can see that parallel to the YZ plane, beta. Ritika, this is YZ plane. See this wall, na, which we are considering over here in the diagram. This wall is parallel to the YZ plane, na, because like this. So the YZ plane is the plane of this wall coming out of the plane of the paper. So the YZ plane. So therefore, the average force due to the single molecule making successive collisions with the wall. So we can say average force is impulse upon average time, where this tau is the average time between successive collisions. So this equation here actually comes from the fact that we know force is rate of change of momentum. So therefore, average force is average rate of change of momentum, which is in this particular case the impulse due to each collision divided by the average time between two successive collisions. So that's how this is coming from. The magnitude of this is going to be where J is equal to delta P is equal to the impulse due to a single collision. Okay. And tau is the symbol we are taking for the average time between this thing, two successive collisions. Okay. Now the average time between two successive collisions, this will become 2L by Vx. Why? Because what is happening is after the impact, let's say this molecule is making an impact like this, it'll have a motion, let's say like this, then get back here. Now it's always having a component of velocity along the x-axis, which is of magnitude Vx. That remains constant. Okay. Because all collisions are perfectly elastic. So therefore, the average time between two successive collisions is the magnitude of the change in x coordinate divided by the magnitude of the x component of velocity. So the x coordinate between one collision and the second collision first changes by minus L and then again by plus L. So it is so that's why it is 2L divided by Vx. Okay, so if the particle makes a collision over here at a certain time, let's say t equal to 0, then it's over here, okay, at a time L by Vx, because its component of velocity along the negative x direction is Vx. So it's back again over here at a time of 2L by Vx. Then again it comes here after 3L by Vx. Then again it comes here after 4L by Vx. So like this, successive collisions are at a time interval of 2L by Vx. Okay. So this molecule, as it's going back and forth, the component of its velocity along the x-axis has a fixed magnitude of Vx. So to go from one wall to another wall, it takes L by Vx. And then to come back to the first wall, again, it takes L by Vx. So between two successive collisions with the same wall, the time will be 2L by Vx. Okay. So from this now we can see that the average force due to the single molecule is 2mvx divided by 2L by Vx. So to mvx square by L. This is the average force. So this is the average force due to repeated collisions by a single molecule. So it's like if our gas sample had just one single isolated molecule which was moving like this, it would apply an average force on the wall of this much. But of course, now it has n number of molecules, so we will have to take that into consideration. So we will multiply this by a factor of n, because it's not just one single molecule colliding repeatedly, it's n number of molecules which are repeatedly colliding. So that will give us the net force, and the net force divided by area will give us the pressure. So that's how we'll get the relationship between RMS velocity and pressure finally. Okay. But to understand that, make sure you first follow these steps. So I'm just going to minimize this a little so that you can refer to the part on top also. I'm just telling you one thing, you don't need to memorize the steps of this derivation. You will not be asked that at the competitive exam level, but you need to just understand the steps. Okay. What you need to memorize is the final formula which we'll get. So I'll tell you what you need to remember. You don't need to rote learn or memorize these steps. You just need to understand how these were derived in the first place. Yeah, so Aruja, see what is happening is that the distance between this wall, okay, and this wall here, this is L. Okay. So let's say just now one collision has happened. So this is at t equal to 0, one collision has happened, and after this collision, the molecule is moving like this. So its x component of velocity is how much? Minus Vx. So to reach from this wall to this wall, what is the x component of displacement? So if it reaches here at time t1, that time t1 should be the change in the x coordinate divided by the magnitude of x component of velocity. So that is how much? L divided by Vx. But no, because basically we can say time is displacement divided by velocity. So that is the same thing as delta x by Vx, delta y by Vy, and delta z by Vz. If we write this in components, is it clear now this term? Okay. So now to come back to the first wall, how much extra time it will take? Yeah. So that's the idea. So now from here, suppose it goes like this and again comes and hits here. So this time T2 will become again T1 plus L by Vx. So it will become 2L by Vx. So that is only capital T or tau. So between two parallel walls which are separated by L, going from one wall to the other takes a time of L by Vx. So coming back to the first takes double of that. Okay. So this becomes the average force due to a single molecule making repeated collisions. Okay. So now the gas sample has capital N number of molecules making repeated collisions on each wall. Therefore, the net force on any wall from all n molecules colliding like this will be n into average force per molecule. So that will become n into mvx squares mean divided by L. So the force is nm vx squares mean divided by L. Okay. So next step from this, we can see that the pressure will become this net force divided by the area, which is L square. Therefore, the pressure P experienced by each wall will be this net force due to all the molecules repeatedly colliding divided by area. So the net force will be this divided by the area of each wall, which is L square. Okay, now remember L cube is the volume. So we have P is equal to number of molecules into molecular mass into Vx squares average divided by volume. So we have this interesting relation between Vx squares average, pressure and volume. Okay, now next step after this, we are going to use the property of Brownian motion to relate Vx squares average with RMS velocity. And finally, that's how we'll find the relation between pressure and RMS velocity. So just make sure you understand these steps next. Okay, so let's come to the final step of the derivation. So now it's very simple. You can see from here that Vx squares mean becomes PV divided by Nm. Now recall from Brownian motion concept, we had this. Okay, so therefore B RMS square, okay, so we have the relationship that RMS velocity is square root of 3 times pressure into volume divided by the total mass of gas molecules. You can see the denominator is number of molecules into molecular mass. N into M is equal to the total mass of the gas molecules, the total mass of the gas sample. It is number of molecules into molecular mass. So this is the first formula of kinetic theory of gases. The relation of RMS velocity in terms of pressure and volume. Okay, people. So this will be continued in the next lecture, and finally, after that, we'll see the numerical applications of these formulae that we developed from kinetic theory of gases. Okay. So that's it for today's session, people. Wish you all the best. Make sure you revise these concepts that we've learned about the kinetic model and its assumptions, etc., from today's lecture, so that you can pick up from there in the next lecture without any difficulty in understanding. Also, complete questions from thermal expansion and calorimetry from your module based on the lectures we've had till last week. So that's it for today's session, people. Wish you all the best. Yes, I will send the notes and the recording of the last lecture also. Yes, I will do that along with today's lecture.